Detective Raymond Cortez had learned to read silence long before he learned to read crime scenes. Silence had a way of telling the truth: what happened, what didn't, what was lost. But on the cold November morning he stepped into the Hicks residence, the silence felt heavier than any he had ever known. It clung to the walls, thick and unmoving, like the house itself was holding its breath. A cinnamon candle still glowed faintly on the mantel, its flame steady despite everything that had taken place. Cortez paused beside it, struck by the smallness of the light, the normalcy of the scent, the cruel contrast with the violence that had shattered this home. Toys set neatly in a basket beside the sofa. A jacket was draped over a chair. Two coffee mugs, one rinsed, one drying, rested by the sink. Signs of a life lived with routine and affection. Signs of a home that should have been safe. He had worked homicides for more than 2 decades, and yet this one carved at him in a way he hadn't expected. Justin and Amber Hicks were known for their kindness, their warmth, their willingness to help anyone who needed it. People said Justin's laugh filled a room, Amber's smile softened it. Their deaths left the neighborhood stunned, afraid of how something so terrible could happen in a place so ordinary. A place where people still waved at each other from driveways and left porch lights on simply out of habit, not caution. In the days that followed, leads emerged, some contradictory, some promising, some troubling. And then came the name Matthew Lanza, a young man taken into custody after a separate break-in a few days later. The puzzle slowly shifted, reshaping itself around him. Cortez was assigned to review Lanza's digital history, a task that always required patience, neutrality, and a certain level of emotional detachment. But as he opened the October search logs on his computer, he felt that detachment begin to thin. The screen glowed in the dim light of the lab as the first entries appeared. Searches about firearms, some were technical ballistics comparisons, parts and modifications, while others felt more frantic, rushed, typed with emotion rather than curiosity. Then there were the searches about Catholicism, symbolism, passages about fear, guilt, redemption, sin. Scattered among them were stranger terms, disjointed thoughts typed into a search bar by someone who seemed to be reaching for meaning, or drowning in it. There was no coherent pattern. No straight line of motive or intent. It felt more like fragments of a restless mind. A storm of late-night compulsions and unresolved anxiety. Cortez exhaled slowly, adjusting his glasses as he scrolled. He had studied enough behavioral reports over the years to recognize when someone was struggling internally, but digital traces were only that, traces. They didn't tell the full story. They didn't confirm what had happened inside a person's mind. Only what a person reached for in the dark, outside the station. The community's grief swelled, candlelight vigils formed along sidewalks. Neighbors embraced with trembling hands, murmuring prayers, sharing memories, trying to steady the emotional freefall. People who had never spoken to one another now stood shoulder to shoulder, bound by collective heartbreak. Flowers accumulated on the Hicks front lawn: roses, lilies, handwritten notes, drawings from children too young to understand the scope of what had been taken. Even veteran officers found their voices wavering during press briefings. It wasn't just tragedy they saw, tragedy often. It was the innocence of the victims, the senselessness of the violence, the lingering question of why. Why this home? Why this couple? Why any of it? Cortez tried to leave the case at the station each night, but it clung to him. At home, he sat in the living room after dinner, the TV muted as his mind retraced digital breadcrumbs. He wondered what emotional storms hidden behind the typed phrases. He wondered about the Hicks child, now in the care of family members, growing up with a story he would one day need explained. He wondered about the parents of the accused, who would now live with a different kind of grief, one that came not from loss but from bewilderment, fear, and disbelief. Cases like this carved scars into everyone connected to them. There were no clean edges, no simple villains, no tidy explanations. Only people flawed, wounded, sometimes dangerous, sometimes desperate, and the devastating consequences their actions or unraveling could bring. By the end of the month, Cortez compiled his full analysis of the October searches. He cross-checked timestamps, categorized themes, looked for connections the way a mapmaker studies rivers for patterns. The result wasn't a clear narrative, but a series of glimpses into what might have been a turbulent psychological landscape. It would be up to attorneys, mental health experts, and ultimately a court to determine what it all meant. His job was to provide the facts, nothing more. But cases weren't just facts. They were human stories, whether anyone wanted them to be or not. One cold December morning, after submitting his final report, Cortez drove through the same suburban neighborhood where the Hicks family had lived. Christmas lights blinked from rooftops and railings, casting soft colors onto lawns and driveways. Yet the street felt muted, as though even the season's brightness couldn't quite lift the shadow left behind. He slowed as he approached the house. The flowers on the lawn had wilted in the cold, but they remained testaments to love, to grief, to community. Cortez parked at the curb and sat quietly, the engine ticking as it cooled. He placed his hands on the steering wheel, grounding himself in the stillness. Detectives weren't supposed to get emotional, or so the training manuals implied. But manuals didn't stand in houses like this one. Manuals didn't speak with devastated families or listen to neighbors cry on their porches. Manuals didn't have to open search logs filled with signs of a mind wrestling with darkness. So Cortez allowed himself a moment to feel the weight, to acknowledge it, to release it just enough to breathe. Because violence didn't end when the crime scene was cleared. It spread, it lingered, it reshaped people's lives in ways that rarely made the evening news. He started the car again, taking one last look at the quiet street before pulling away. The holiday lights blurred softly in his rearview mirror. He knew he would carry this case with him not because of its brutality, but because of its humanity. Because within its tragedy lay the reminder that even the smallest choices, the quietest thoughts, the hidden struggles could ripple outward in ways no one ever expected. And so Detective Cortez continued down the road, toward the next call, the next unanswered question, the next silence waiting to be read.